Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, but we're going to head up towards Gothenburg once again. Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. It's becoming a bit of a catchphrase now on the channel, of course, because of how much good beer there is in Gothenburg these days. But for this review we are going to return to a brewery who are probably one of my favourites here in Sweden. They're always doing some very interesting beers, and they featured on the channel a good number of times before. This must be review number like 15 or so, I think, that I've done from these guys, but it does feel like a little while since I've had one of their beers, and this one is a little bit different actually, so I'm very curious to see what it has in store for us today. So for this review then, we are going to have a look at yet another beer from Beerbliotek. And this one is called Alone in a Field of Plenty. It's number 286 according to the Beerbliotek numbering system, and they're describing this one as a 9.5% wheat wine. Dark wheat wine, this one. So yeah, wheat wine, it's not a style that's all that common these days. Basically, it's the same idea as a barley wine, but it's got a significant portion of the malt base that is wheat. The wheat wines I've had before, I've had two actually from Japan. I actually can't think whether I've had a wheat wine that has been non-Japan brewed. It's a style that you really don't see very commonly in Europe. I'm pretty certain that this is the very first wheat wine I've had from Sweden, if not the first wheat wine that I've ever had in Europe actually. So yeah, it's an interesting one that. So with this style guys, this is something that I would like to explore a little bit more. Do give me some recommendations of wheat wines in the comments section below. I know there's quite a few out on the west coast in the States, but yeah, as I say, other than the west coast of the States, and you know, Japan has a few examples as well, I can't really think of very many wheat wines at all. So yeah, basically a wheat wine is a barley wine with a chunk of the malt base is wheat. But yeah, this is the very first dark wheat wine that I've come across as well, so this makes this beer kind of quirky and interesting in that regard as well. So there must only be about 4, maybe 5 reviews of wheat wines on the channel in total. But yeah, this is one of the things you can rely on Beerbliotek to do. These guys will always do really interesting and very kind of quirky beers, so I'm really curious to see what this one has in store for us today, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. Very curious about this, and it's always nice to have some Beerbliotek beers on the channel. You will be seeing more of these in September actually as well. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Beerbliotek before, and you will see more added to that list in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there too. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Beerbliotek then, on to my brewery notes. So as I've mentioned to you already, Beerbliotek are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the west coast, and the company was founded back in 2013 by a multinational group of friends. This is Adam Norman, who's from Australia, Richard Bull, who's from New Zealand, a Kiwi, Anders Hedlund, who is a Swede, and then Darryl De Necker, who is from South Africa. And I've spoken to Darryl over Messenger and things quite a few times, and I need to see if he will do a kind of meet the brewery segment for the channel at some point later. I'd love to get Beerbliotek on there, because these guys are a really quite quirky brewery in that sense, always trying different things. So yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, I can sort something out with Darryl, and we can do a Meet the Brewery segment, a Meet the Brewery interview with them actually, because I know they've got the 2 breweries these days. But anyway, but yeah, the way that these guys kind of got together, Adam and Richard ran Bar Doppio in Gothenburg, and then Darryl and Anders were regular customers at the bar, and they often just used to sit and chat away about different beer styles and things like this. And so one day they decided that they were going to buy a brew kit, and brew their own beer, and it went very well for them. So the original brewery that they had is in the old Klippan Sugar building, and this is a really nice old building that's very close to the old Carnegie Brewery in Gothenburg. The brew kit that they had in there, the original one was from Brewfab in Scotland, and in the first year they produced 38 different kinds of beer, which is pretty damn impressive, I have to say. And in the early days, all their beers were being brewed in very, very small batches, and they were only being brewed once. And they said that they did this to kind of let themselves kind of stick to the home brewing roots of the brewery, if you like. So for a long time, I think even still today, they technically don't have a fixed range, and they're always brewing brand new beers. But so yeah, they still always brew brand new beers, but there are a few of them that you will find in Systembolaget regularly. For example, A Moment of Clarity, which, if I remember, it was brewed for the GBG or Beer Week. If I'm remembering rightly, it was the 2018 GBG Beer Week beer. So yeah, A Moment of Clarity is a regular brew. These guys do have beers that are released all the time through Systembolaget now. So yeah. And they are, you know, they kind of do have a fixed range, but I guess that probably will change at some point in the future. But yeah, that's a really nice session IPA, actually, A Moment of Clarity. But yeah, the idea behind the name of this brewery was that they just wanted to basically teach beer drinkers about like a new hop, a new malt, a new yeast, or something like this, for them to learn about something, one of the ingredients in beer, every time they drank a new beer. So, you know, Bibliotek, of course, in Swedish means library, and they've gone for Beerbliotek, so the name is essentially a little bit of a play on words, if you like, and yeah, I think it works quite well. But in 2015, these guys opened up a second brewery in Kungston, which is where they now have their tap room as well, and they run their main brewing operations out of there, and they've got a good barrel aging program there too, from what I understand. The old brewery is now used for producing sour beers, and you know, they've been, as I say, they've been working quite extensively on a barrel aging program as well. There hasn't been too many of the barrel-aged beers released in Sweden, unfortunately. I do hope that they can change that at some point soon, now that they've got the Local Osmoskalig releases. But yeah, we've only had one or two beers from the Barrel Age series, unfortunately, and I do hope that they change that. There is a Scotch ale available from the Barrel Age series, but yeah, that hasn't been released in Sweden, unfortunately, because I would love to see how these guys would do a Scotch ale. But as I've kind of inferred throughout this history section, these guys are a very prolific brewery, and as of August 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 265 different kinds of beer. So yeah, very, very prolific brewery, I have to say. And as I said to you earlier, one of my favourites actually. It's quite impressive that these guys can put out so many good quality beers so quickly. That's one of the things that's always impressed me with Beerbliotek, and they're not afraid to try different styles as well. I've had black IPAs from these guys, I've had New Englands, I've had West Coast IPAs, I've had Imperial Stouts, you know, I've had some really, really good stuff from these guys over the years. The Eternal Darkness is a beautiful Imperial Stout, and Eternal Dankness as well. Those are yearly releases that they do, and they just change the recipe very slightly, and those are two that I would really recommend that you keep an eye out for. And they do a lot of collaborations these days as well. A Passion for Gingers is a really interesting beer to try as well, and that's one that you can find fairly regularly from these guys as well. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Beerbliotek for the moment. Like I said to you, one of my favourite Swedish breweries, mainly because of how quirky and how prolific they are, so I would highly recommend that you check these guys out if you find yourself in Gothenburg. And yeah, like I said, the next time I go up to Gothenburg, I'm going to see if I can film a review, maybe with Daryl and maybe some of the other guys at Beerbliotek. It'd be nice to do a little out and about video at both of the breweries that they've got. They do have a tap room at the old brewery for the sour beers. They've only released a couple of sour beers, from what I understand. I think it's only been 3 they've released so far, but maybe there will be more coming a little bit later on. And you know, it would be cool to go and see the regular tap room at the brewery as well. But yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this one then. If you want to learn more about Beerbliotek, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all those different beers that they've done. So yeah, just give you a little quick look at the artwork on this one, and it is quite similar, I guess, to a number of the other Beerbliotek beers that you will have seen. It's usually, yeah, they usually have this big kind of bee thing, but in the background, it's usually this kind of background that will change a little bit. But yeah, as you can see, it says on the side here, a dark wheat wine bound by invisible fences, the fields we have sown stand empty. For those that harvest are alone, surrounded by their fields of plenty. Get in touch at beerbliotek.com. So yeah, a little bit of poetry on the side there. But me, I'm poetically kind of illiterate in that sense. I was never a great fan of studying poetry at school. But one of the touches I really like that Beerbliotek do is that they put on the side here, Swedish brewed craft beer, Gothenburg. So I really like that little touch. I wish more Swedish breweries and breweries from across Europe would do this actually. Some of them do. I know that Puaste in Estonia, they write Estonian craft beer on it, but I think to put the national flags on these things is pretty cool. But yeah, 9.5% ABV, this one, described as a dark wheat wine, number 286 in the Beerbliotek thing. And this is one of the things, if you think about this, from what Daryl told me before, not all of the beers do make it out. So if you think they've brewed, you know, 286 different recipes, but 265 of them have been released, I think that tells you, you know, that's a pretty good rate of return actually. So they have dumped very, very few batches over the, what would it be, over the 8 years or so that these guys have been going. I think that's pretty impressive actually. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. So yeah, what I would say to you with Beerbliotek, keep an eye on the Lokalos and Småskulit releases at the start of every month, because then yeah, you will get, you can keep an eye out for Beerbliotek and see the different things that do. I think for September it's a double IPA that's going to be coming out, so you will see that one reviewed on the channel a little bit later. But yeah, this one looks pretty interesting, I have to say. So as you can see, this one has poured with about a third finger of a frothy, I would say kind of beigey fawn coloured head. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass there, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head. So yeah, in terms of colour, if we shine the light through this, it's actually a very kind of, it's actually a very nice looking ruby, very strong ruby colour. And this is kind of, it's kind of got the same appearance you might expect of a Doppelbock, to be honest with you. I think it's fair to describe this one as very Doppelbock-like in its appearance. It's a really nice kind of ruby. You will find Doppelbocks that are a bit more kind of, how would you say, more mahogany or chestnutty in colour. So this one is a very nice kind of strong ruby beer actually. I really like how this goes together. Yeah, the appearance of this one it does look very nice. I wasn't sure what to expect from a dark wheat wine, to be honest with you. Usually wheat wines, in my experience, they're usually quite a strong kind of ambery colour. You know, barley wines, this one maybe just, you will get normal barley wines that are this kind of colour as well. So yeah, interesting one. It looks, from the colour of this one, it looks as if it's mainly, you know, things, it's probably got like different types of caramel and things like that in it, rather than having any black malt and things. So yeah, probably what this one is, it's like, because the wheat wines I think do have a little bit less kind of brown sugar and stuff put into them. They do tend to be a little bit more kind of bready and almost fudgy. What I think this one is more likely to be is a bit more of a kind of darkery, treacle, molassesy type wheat wine. That's probably what they're going for with this one. But yeah, in terms of appearance, it looks a bit like a Doppelbock. I think it's fair to say that. The colour of the head and things like that, yeah, a little bit more like a Doppelbock, or I guess you could argue just a regular barley wine. So yeah, wasn't sure what to expect from this one, so quite an interesting experience if you like. Let's have a look at that aroma then and just see how we get on with this beer. Oh yeah. See, to be honest with you, it actually really smells like a Doppelbock as well. That's interesting. There is just something about this beer, it smells a bit German. That's really interesting. I didn't expect that from it. The aroma in this one, I would say this is definitely not the most pungent aroma I've had from a Beerbliotek beer. I really would say that. Definitely not the most pungent aroma that I've had from a Beerbliotek beer. It's interesting, this one, because you do get that kind of wheaty, you can smell the wheat just underneath this one, but the wheat almost comes out as more like a kind of subtlety, to be honest with you. You can smell a bit of that smooth, white bready, wheaty base to this beer. And it is really nice actually. I do like how that goes together, but in terms of the yeah, you know, in terms of the the brown sugars and stuff, they do come across as very Doppelbock-like. So yeah, you do have a little bit of a kind of treacly molasses kind of thing coming out of it, that really highly caramelised, brown sugar coming out of this one. It does have a little bit of a sweeter caramel in there as well. It's really nice and kind of, there's a bit of a roasty, toasty brown sugar in there as well. There's a bit of a kind of McVitie's Digestive biscuity kind of thing to it also. But yeah, the way that the brown sugars come out in this, I really, really think this is very similar to a German Doppelbock in that sense. I do wonder if that's the idea behind it, if they've made the brown sugars that they've added on the base of the wheat wine to be Doppelbock like. I do wonder if that's kind of what they've gone for here, a kind of combination of Doppelbock and wheat wine. But yeah, I mean, the thing that surprises me about this is a wheat wine. It is actually very clear. It's a very, very clear beer, this one. So maybe they have filtered this, because I would think if it was a wheat wine, the wheat wines I've seen before usually tend to have a good, they do have a little bit more haze to them than this. This actually is as clear as you would get from some lagers, to be honest with you. And the Doppelbock is essentially a very strong Dunkel lager, actually. So yeah, it's interesting that the aroma of this one, definitely not the most pungent aroma, like I said, that I've had from Beerbliotek. But yeah, I think if you gave me this beer blind to smell, I would think it was a Doppelbock. I think I would. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, there's a little bit of a kind of smooth earthiness to it. You do get a little touch of a floral character, and again, the floral notes on this one are a little bit kind of almost noble-like. There's a little bit of grassiness to this one as well. There's something telling me that the hop in this may well be like Northern Brewer from Germany. There is just something completely German about this beer, and that's unusual because, you know, the wheat wine, it's a West Coast American style. And it's one that I first encountered from the Japanese breweries, like you know, St. Gallen and things like this. I think Baird Beer over there also have one. I think those are the two that I've reviewed actually. The St. Gallen, the El Angel is the El Añel is the El Añel is the wheat wine that they have, and then I think it's I can't remember what the Baird Beer one is called, but yeah, I have reviewed those two. But yeah, the aroma of this is nice. On the fruity side of things, yeah, you've got a little bit of a kind of, there is a little bit of a kind of plummy, slightly raisiny note to it. It's quite figgy at the same time, and then you've got a few kind of blackcurranty, blackberry sort of things. It could be a combination of, you know, Northern Brewer from Germany, Bramling's Cross from England. You know, there's a few American hops that could be in here, maybe Magnum, Williamette, Eureka would be another possibility, but Eureka, from what I understand, it's a beautiful hop that, but you don't see it used all that often. But yeah, as I say, this is a really, really unusual one in terms of its aroma. I could sit and smell this all day, but if you gave this beer to me to sort of blind sniff, I would think this was a Doppelbock. I would probably tell you that this is a German Doppelbock. So yeah, I'm really, really not sure what to expect from this one, I have to say. But yeah, let's have a taste of it then and see how we get on. So this one is called Alone in a Field of Plenty. Number 286 in the Beerbliotek numbering system. They're describing it as a wheat wine, a dark wheat wine. It comes in at 9.5% ABV. Very unusual, I think, in terms of its aroma and things so far. Let's have a taste of it and see how we get on. I love reviews like this where you get really random stuff. But yeah, let's have a taste of this one then. Slange Skål. Oh yeah, yeah. It's yeah, it is actually. To be honest with you, this one, on the flavour, it is actually just, it's almost like a kind of slightly wheaty Doppelbock in a lot of ways. It really has that kind of, it really has that lagery sort of cleanliness to it. Because, you know, to me, the barley wines are a lot, they feel a lot just kind of thicker. They feel a lot like very, very thick and very, very caramelly. This one feels very, very clean. It almost, you know, it does have an element of that kind of chewiness that you'd expect from it does it does have an element of that kind of chewiness that you'd expect, that big oily thickness you'd expect from a barley wine. You do get that a little bit more that you drink of this, but at the same time, it really does have an element of cleanliness to it that you'd expect of these German Doppelbocks. The other styles, of course, that we could compare this to would be like the Scotch ale and the quadruple, but the original Scotch ales are a bit more they're a little bit more kind of toasty and roasty than this. The Belgian quads, of course, are a bit more kind of yeasty and things. This one, it really is the dark malty styles that we can compare this to. It really is it's most similar to a Doppelbock in certain ways. As I say, this whole dark wheat wine thing, this is a really kind of quirky idea, but yeah, it is. You do get the wheat on the back of the palate, but the rest of the beer, it is. It is almost like a slightly more wheaty Doppelbock. This one, so yeah. But I say I like this beer. It is very quirky. I think, in fairness, it's not this isn't a conventional beer, so a lot of people might be a little bit kind of confused with what this beer is actually trying to go for. And it is a nice drinkable beer. It really it's a little bit, if I think about the Doppelbocks, it is a little bit more there is a little bit more of a kind of roasty toastiness to the brown sugars here than you might get in the Doppelbock. So yeah, it's a slightly more bready Doppelbock, but also a little bit more roasty and toasty. That's the interesting thing to kind of take away from this one. So yeah, I really like how it goes together. As I say, if I compare this to some of the other, this isn't. I wouldn't say this is the quirkiest beer that I've had from Beerbliotek. I mean, that probably goes to the Would I Lie to You. I remember that being a really, really kind of very unusual, quirky beer. But this one's just it's a nice big kind of malty beast, this. I think it's fair to say that. Let's try and describe the flavour of this one somehow. It's very difficult to attribute this one to a particular style, but the question should be, is the beer good? Is it nice? Yes, it is. Is it the kind of best and sort of most satisfying beer that you're going to find from Beerbliotek? Not quite certain on that, to be honest. This one is a little bit more. This is one of these beers that you try because it is kind of quite quirky, actually. So yeah, let's describe that flavour then. So yeah, straight away with this beer, if you go towards the back third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of that wheaty, kind of white bready note coming out of the beer. The carbonation in this one, as I say, it's quite smooth, and that helps promote that a little bit. You do get a little bit of spiciness and a bit of a roasty toasty quality sitting underneath the kind of wheaty notes there as well. But yeah, as you move further forward into the middle of the palate, then it does have a little bit more of a roasty toasty edge. You can feel a little bit of a very roasty, well fired brown sugar. That's kind of forming the base of the middle third of your palate, which is interesting. So yeah, yeah, as I say, nice kind of very roasty, toasty brown sugars there in the middle of the palate. As you kind of move on top of that, this beer, it does really dry out in the middle of your palate there too. In the very centre of your tongue, you do get quite a bit of a kind of caramelly sweetness. It's almost a bit treacly and molasses-like, to be honest with you. There is almost just a little island in the middle of your tongue that's quite treacly and molasses. Then just on top of that, it's very sweet and caramelly, but you get a kind of grainy, a kind of roasty, toasty, grainy bitterness kind of coming out of that one as well. So yeah, the middle of your palate does actually feel quite light, and it doesn't really feel kind of so thick and oily, and that's probably what gives the impression of this beer being quite Doppelbock-like. But yeah, as you go into the back third of your palate, you do get the wheaty notes out of the beer, a little bit spicy, as I say, but that roasty, toasty kind of edge that this beer has kind of sits underneath that, and you do get a wee bit of spice almost out of the wheat in this one as well. But the brown sugars in this beer are very dark, and I get the impression from the colour of this beer as well that it's probably had quite a long boil, but you will feel more and more graininess coming out of this beer in the middle of the palate as well, which is quite interesting. So yeah, the malty side of this one, it's surprisingly straightforward. It is a bit of a straight shooter, this one. And yeah, it is in the middle of the palate. It is very kind of clean and very sort of like Doppelbock-like in a certain way. So yeah, to me it strikes me as a bit more of a Doppelbock than a wheat wine, in honest with you. But again, the other thing you have to consider here is it may well be the Scandinavian water. You'll always find this, generally speaking, with Scandinavian brewed beers, they do come across as quite clean in the mouthfeel and things. So yeah, bear that in mind when you try Scandinavian beer. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, there is definitely a little bit of earthiness in there. It's quite a strong earthiness, so that does make me think there will be an American hop in this beer as well. But yeah, as you move further forward along the sides of the palate here, you do get a little bit of a herbal quality coming out of this one. As you move further forward, it does become a little bit more floral and slightly aromatic on the front corners of the palate, and then round the very front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy actually. So that's interesting. So yeah. The fruity side of this beer is quite interesting as well, but yeah, definitely nice and light and grassy around the front the front curve of your tongue. But yeah, on the front third of your palate then, the fruits in this one actually come across as a little bit almost phenolic. It's almost kind of, in some ways, the fruity character that you get out of this is almost a bit like an English barley wine. It's got a little bit of that kind of phenolic, medicinally kind of thing. It's almost a little bit Belgian Dubel like in its fruity character actually. That's another style that you could compare this beer to. But yeah, if you go towards the back of that front third of the palate, there's a bit of that sort of cough syrupy, medicinal kind of thing. You know, it's a bit datey, kind of pruny sort of thing. But yeah, as you move further forward from that, it does develop a little bit of a figgy note to it. There's maybe a bit of a kind of juicy plum there as well. Yeah, at the back of the palate, definitely kind of sort of phenolic, datey, pruny. As you move further forward, a bit more juicy and plummy and figgy and things, and then as you reach the very kind of front tip of the tongue, it's a little bit kind of blackcurranty and blackberry like for sure, which is quite interesting. So yeah, the fruitiness that you get out of this beer is really quite nicely done. So yeah, this one I think is really quite, it's a really interesting beer this. In terms of its flavour profile, it's got quite a few quirks. Like I say, I think the malty side of this beer in the middle of the palate is quite Doppelbock like. You get the wheat on the back end of the palate there. It's got a nice roasty toasty edge to it as well, but then the fruitiness you get out of this is a little bit more kind of Dubel or English barley wine like. It's definitely got a bit of that kind of phenolic-y, medicinally type vibe to it as well. So yeah, this is definitely one of the quirkiest beers I've had from Beerbliotek so far. I think it's one of these ones where if you try this, I think you would maybe, a lot of people I think might feel this one's quite confused in what it's trying to go for. But if you just take it as an experiment, if you like, if you consider it as an experiment, it's a nice enough beer to drink. I think it's fair to say that. This is a nice kind of sipper. It's almost a bit like a winter warmer, I think, this beer. I think it's a bit strange, I think, that they would release something like this in August. This is a sort of beer, if I'd been sort of Beerbliotek and was planning it, I probably would have released something like this in like November or December, maybe January, something like that. You'd release this as a sort of winter warmer, I think. So yeah, it's curious. Curious as to the idea behind releasing this now, because it definitely has a bit of that winter warmer vibe to it. But yeah, an interesting beer, this one. I like doing reviews like this where you're not sure exactly what's kind of going on with the beer. But yeah, quite Doppelbock-like in my opinion. I would say this one, but it does have a little bit of that. The mouthfeel is a bit barley wine-like and wheat wine-like, I would say. So yeah, let's move on to that mouthfeel then and round off the review. So yeah, this one, I'd say that it's kind of top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. The carbonation is smooth on this one. It does have a bit of wetness to the mouthfeel, and there's a wee touch of oiliness in there as well. Like I said, the wee oily notes are a bit more barley wine-like, and it's also a bit more, it does have a bit of the kind of lager type cleanliness to it, you know. A lot of it really reminds me of a kind of toasty and slightly more wheaty Doppelbock, if you like. I think that's a fair way to describe this one. But yeah, the malt base, it does have a bit of a roasty toasty edge to it. There's a kind of smooth breadiness to it, a good bit of a kind of brown sugary type quality in there, like a really well fired and a big toasty brown sugary note to it. Bit of hoppy character. It does have a wee bit of hoppy bitterness, but not too much. Maybe, what would we say, about 30ish IBUs. It's got somewhere in that kind of region, and there's some really interesting fruits to this beer as well. It's quite you know, it's quite sort of phenolic in some ways. It's a little bit you know, it's got a little bit of the kind of typical red fruity notes as well, actually, which is very interesting. So yeah, take a little bit of time and just enjoy this beer. I think, view it as something quirky that you're tasting. This is the sort of beer that you'd get in a little tasting flight and be like, oh yeah, this is quite interesting. But yeah, very Doppelbock-like in my mind, but the fruitiness is a little bit more English barley wine like, and maybe Dubbel, Belgian Dubbel like in a sense as well. So yeah, this is just a really, really quirky beer. This is why I like Beerbliotek. They're always doing kind of random things. But yeah, they describe this one as a dark wheat wine, but there's a lot, the wheat, it's not, I feel this one isn't, just isn't quite as sweet as a kind of wheat wine should be in some ways. And it really does remind me of being more Doppelbock-like, in fairness. But yeah, it's an interesting beer, this one. I've really enjoyed this review. I like beers like this that do make you think about exactly what's going on. So this review has probably been a little bit of a kind of ramble in some ways. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed it nonetheless. I do love beers like this that kind of test the palate a little bit. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one was called Alone in a Field of Plenty. A dark wheat wine at 9.5% ABV, quite Doppelbock-like though, as I said, and a little bit of an English barley wine, kind of Belgian Dubbel type fruity quality to it, from Beerbliotek in Gothenburg in Sweden. A brewery that I really, really like, and you know, I've enjoyed reviewing this one for you. I do hope we get more of the barrel-aged beers. I would love to review some more of those for you on the channel, but you will see, I think it's a double IPA from them sometime in September. So keep your eyes out for that review. If you do find yourself in Gothenburg, go and visit the Beerbliotek tap rooms. That's something that I do have plans to do at some point, hopefully. In early 2021. We'll need to see what we can do there. But yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Beerbliotek. It's been really good to review this one for you, and I will catch you soon with more reviews. Till the next time, Slàinte just now, and I'll catch you guys later. Slàinte, skål. Make sure you check out Beerbliotek. This one was Alone in a Field of Plenty, a 9.5% dark wheat wine from Beerbliotek in Gothenburg on the west coast of Sweden. Slàinte, skål, cheers.